So how's everything over there?
We're doing well, man. We're doing well. Staying busy. It's hot. It's hot in Phoenix.
Been there before, like 3 years ago, I think, and it was at Exos.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we get a lot of visitors in.
Oh, that was good. So, first of all, like, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Brady Howe. I'm the VP of Health and Performance for the Phoenix Suns.
So, I know you've been training like players in the NBA for years, right?
Yep.
So, what's it like to be like a strength coach in the NBA or a performance coach?
That's a great question. It comes with, it's a lot of fun, but it comes with ups and downs, right? So what you would, in the nature of basketball, the challenges that come is a long schedule, a lot of travel. And so there's a lot of constraints that come with it that most probably wouldn't think of, you know what I mean? Like from equipment that you would need on the road, programming over the course of a long season. But it's honestly, it's everything that as a strength coach that you would hope for. You know, you get to work with elite level athletes who are highly capable of any movement, you know, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, but it has its challenges.
Cool. So, I know you start at a high school strength coach, right?
Actually, right out of graduating college, my first job, I'd worked in the high school setting a little bit, but my first job was actually an athletic trainer in the high school setting, and it was shortly after that I was working in the G League.
So how to like start as a high school athletic trainer to be a like vice president for performance coach in the NBA?
I think that if you were looking for the fastest route, if it was possible, is developing a high level network. You know, you reach out to just be consistent and persistent with reaching out to anybody that you possibly can, and realize that I truly have seen the majority of the people who work in the NBA, their goal wasn't to work in the NBA. They just found themselves in that position where they had made a network of colleagues and friends, and along the way, whether it was, you know, semi-pro, college, high school, they found a way to connect with others and find something, either a resource, an ability to solve problems to a high level, and they stood out, you know. And then those people who are in a position to hire and build the team in the NBA, you know, they'll remember people who are able to have that work ethic, have that great personality, and be able to be a great teammate.
Cool. So, since you've been working in the NBA, and there's like a chaotic, I mean, every season is chaotic. There's like back-to-back games. So, how to like train your athlete to be durable through like the whole season?
Again, that's a great question. It kind of depends on the player, whether they're, I mean, we've got players who have almost been in the NBA 20 years, and then we've got some players who are 19 years old as a rookie. And so what their needs are will depend how, the extent of how they train. But over the course of a long season, honestly, you have to, I believe we have found a successful way to go about it is to kind of categorize your days in themes, meaning you have really high days and low days. And so for game days, those are the highest days, no matter whether you're at home or on the road. They're just high level stressors, high level volume. And so we try to actually tap into those days and get our micro dosing lifts. So some of these guys will come in on a game day and they'll lift in the morning, like a very light lift, get moving, and then they have shoot around. Some of them will also do a light lift or some type of movement capacity before the game. And then we would play the game, and then they have, most of them like to do a post-game lift. And again, these are very short. Some of these lifts are 15 minutes, you know, so they're not strenuous where we're putting these guys in the dirt so that they can't perform. But we like to keep those themes because the schedule is crazy. Like you said, back-to-back days, travels. Sometimes you just have no control over what the schedule is going to be. And so what you can control are those days. You know when games are going to be. And then when there's not games, you can hopefully unload those guys so that the stressors are much less and that they can recover.
Is it like the quadrant system? Like high days high, low days low, like what you just mentioned? Is it like that?
Yeah, very similar. And so some of those, that's a great resource that you bring up, you know, whether it's the Quadrant System, which if you've read that, that's a great book. And Daniel Bove, actually, he was with our staff, I believe it was 2 years ago. So, yeah. So, and, you know, I go back to Atlanta working with Daniel Bove. So, yeah, he has a brilliant way of simplifying it on paper and making it an ability for others to understand and to put it to work.
Cool. That's like the in-season. How about off-season? How do you prepare your athlete when it's off-season?
Yeah, the off-season is where it's a lot of fun, especially if you have a group of guys who love to work and work in the weight room, because usually it's inverted, right? So when the season's going on for 6, 7, 8 months, the strength coaches and the performance department, they kind of take a back seat. And, you know, because you're obviously helping these guys stay sharp and stay ready to play, but you don't have as much time with them on a daily basis. But now in the off season, which we're currently in, there's very little stuff go on the court right now. And our guys that are coming in are spending, you know, predominantly most of their time in the weight room. So we get to train a little bit more volume and intensities in the weight room. And so it's a really good off-season plan to have. And this is the time of year where our staff really loves it because we've got half our team coming in every day. But then the other part of that is, you know, the other half of your team who may be some veterans who take off to other cities, you know, to see family or where they live. You've got to kind of keep a close communication line open with them so that you know what they're doing and kind of make sure that you're helping to keep them on track.
Cool. So I know like there's a lot of like technology growing right now. So is there like any specific tech you guys use or any data you're going to look into?
You know, we're one of those teams who've been fortunate to land into a new facility over the last few years and kind of partnered up with Verizon. And fortunately, because of that, they've given us the ability to bring in a lot of amazing technology from, you know, biomechanics laboratories with 3D motion analysis and triaxial force plates. So those things have been great that we use quite a bit. We've also started to use IMU. You know what I mean? So we've been able to put the straps over these guys' ankles that we're looking from a return to play and rehab standpoint. So that's been valuable. Some of the other tech that, you know, I would say most are using are the wearables. You know, you've got your Connexons and some of the wearables that have been resourceful for some as far as tracking on court. But yeah, I'd say, I mean, there's an endless amount of technology to use. I would say before people go off buying, you know, if they have an endless budget, before they go buying everything, I would say that you need to kind of do a checks and balances of what's really important for you. You know what I mean? And start with simple, because it gets very overwhelming and you get over your head a little bit when you have too much technology and you really don't know how to integrate it, you know, because whatever you're using, you should use it consistently.
So when it comes to like training basketball player, I know like Corey put up a lot of stuff on his Instagram, right? So during the in season, why is it like to be like what you just mentioned, like it's like spread out the day instead of like an hour session?
Some of it is just the logistics of our schedule. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it truly does. You're just trying to find every opportunity to maximize that time. And you know, most of us will never know what it's like to be an NBA basketball player, right? So one, these guys are just extremely gifted, you know, athletes, but they're tall, you know, long levers, and the schedule that's put upon them that most of us don't see are the behind the scenes, like how much time they're spending, with marketing, with their advertising, with their meetings, but just physically, it takes a lot out of them to travel the way that we travel. We have an average travel like 60 to 70,000 miles over the course of a year. So they do a lot. So it wears on them. And so usually the reason for that is we're just trying to find every opportunity to maximize it. But also you don't want to tax them. You know what I mean? Like the goal is for them to perform at a high level on the court. And you know, if we have that opportunity, you can spend an hour with them. I'm not saying it's impossible, but what you do with them during that time, you got to be pretty smart with what you're putting them through.
Get it. So, how, like, throughout your career being in NBA, what do you think is the most important thing for like training athletes?
It's a great question. If I had to try to choose one thing, I would just say movement quality. You know, when you're training guys, it's not so much, again, if I had to choose one thing, you want these guys to move fluidly. You know what I mean? And if you can do that, they're gonna be durable and robust. Because these guys, again, they're patterns, right? And so some of these guys are so tall that some of them come naturally with some predisposed injuries, you know? So I would just say movement quality would be my first thing.
So is there like, that's the 3D motion gonna be working, right? And the force plate.
So some of those things, yeah, are helping from a biomechanics standpoint. You know, if you have a laboratory where you can do some creative stuff, you can see how they move, how they transmit force. It's been pretty nice for us to start tapping into some of the lateral planes rather than just vertical planes.
So is there like, when it comes to like force plate, is there like specific data you're gonna look into?
Yes, and we have a staff like Kohei Tamagawa on our staff. He spends his time predominantly looking at that. And then he kind of collaborates with our performance department on things that he's seeing. So yeah, there are some things that we have that are, you know, key performance indicators, or, you know, some key items that we're looking for. You know, a lot of times we're trying to see how well they can decelerate, you know what I mean? And just as far as some of the vectors that these guys are transmitting force through. But I think some of the biggest things that we like to look at are asymmetries, you know what I mean? And if something really stands out there, especially from a return to play, that's one of our benchmarks there, is if you've got somebody who's going through an injury and we're trying to get them back, or you might be able to key on some of those things. If you're testing them often enough, you might be able to key on some of those differences before an injury happens.
Cool. So to lead a bunch of like strength coaches or sports scientists, what do you think like is the hardest thing?
I would say it's truly just keeping everybody on the same page. I think every team, no matter whether it's pro sports down to the high school level, you know, when you're working with a team, it's just trying to keep everybody on the same page, you know, driving for the same goals and the same outcomes. You know, it's so easy in our environment because you have so many staff members, coaches, players that are involved, that it's easy to just not be on the same page, even if it's just for a brief period of time, you know, and then you start going separate directions. So I would say, you know, especially in my role, it's trying to keep everybody organized and just working in tandem for the same goals. And it's tough because we have various departments. You know, you've got the medical department, performance, you've got sports science, you've got the nutrition, you know, sports psychology, you name it. So it just, I think that's the biggest thing, is just probably communication and trying to do your best to stay on the same page.
Is there, so I know you like have a lot of like people that doesn't work in the NBA. So is that gonna be like hard for you to like let them be, like, lead them to the role they are right now?
You mean like people that are on our staff currently?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, even some of the staff in recent years that we've hired didn't have any NBA experience. And that's kind of going back to your earlier question. It's, you know, you're always just trying to find the best person for the job, you know, and whatever experiences they have, if you feel like that they have some great experiences that have prepared them for this role, by that point, whether the job is, regardless of the title, you know, head, assistant, whatever that role is going to be, you just need to find the right person that you feel like can do the duties of that role that you're creating. So I think that changes amongst the NBA and other teams as well. You know, one assistant strength coach might be responsible for a whole lot more than a different team's assistant strength coach, you know, so it just depends. But we have brought in a handful of team members who didn't have NBA experience, and they've done an amazing job in this setting. So to me, it just shows that you don't have to go and find somebody who has a lifetime of NBA experience. You know, if you found the right person who has a great personality, a great work ethic, and they have had some experiences that have prepared them for that role, then you just need to put them in a good position to succeed.
Cool. So I know the last season was like, the last season was you guys went till the champion round, right? And
Yep.
This season kind of ended earlier a little bit. So how is it different for like performance coaches?
Yeah, the playoffs, I'll say this, the playoffs is tough because you don't know if you're going to be playing for 2 weeks or 2 months, you know, and so you're really just adjusting and adapting on the fly based on the schedule. And that's even tough. I see it from those of us like myself, our equipment managers and the travel party who are responsible for helping organize and coordinate a lot of the travel logistics. It's extremely tough during the course of the playoffs because you just don't know, you know, you're going game by game. And so I'll use an example as even today. For example, we got game 6 tonight of the finals, right? Celtics may very well be done for the season, or if, you know, they hope to win this game, after the game, they've already got to be prepared to have travels, flights, hotels for tomorrow. And so it comes with a lot of challenges. And so you just have to be ready to adjust and adapt. And as far as the performance side goes for strength coaches, you just treat it like you're still in season. You know, you're not trying to beat these guys down at all. You're trying to help prime them and prepare them to play basketball. And so whether that's, you know, and you're at the end of the long season, those guys like the Celtics and Warriors, they've already been playing for 8 months, you know, and those guys are all beat up and tired and sore. So everything they're doing and that we would be doing at this point, if you're in season in the playoffs, is you're just trying to do whatever you can to figure out how do you get them to play at a high level, you know, and sometimes that even changes based on the type of player. You know, is he a starter who plays 40 minutes or is he a a backup that plays 10 minutes. That's going to depend on how you're programming and preparing these guys.
So, I know in the other podcast you mentioned like you do like some of the isometric training, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's a lot of guys talk about like isometric training during the season, but why should we use isometric training?
I think that's one of the safest ways. When you talk about basketball players too, at our level, the college or NBA, you get some really, really tall guys, right? And sometimes a lot of the basic exercise selections that we would do is actually tougher for these guys than you'd think. You know what I mean? And so I think some of it from an isometric standpoint, you're able to provide them a good amount of load that their body probably needs and is seeking for in a season. It also potentiates them, so it gets them ready for either a workout or playing. And then again, it helps them to explore other areas, as far as joint positions while loading, rather than putting them through some of the other exercises that may seem basic to most. But if you tried some of those exercises as a 7-footer, it's not that easy, And so it's definitely isometric training it should be a gold standard for any program, but for ours, especially with such a chaotic season, and again, some of the logistics that we've talked about, some of those sessions on like a game day are primarily isometrics. Now you can get pretty creative and clever with what isometric training is, and you could load it pretty heavy, but that's just giving that. If you try to just get yourself into a split stance and you're holding 2 50-pound kettlebells and you try to hold for 60 seconds, trust me, you're going to give yourself a fair amount of load.
Yeah, that's about like the question for like training. Is for the coaches or like for the young coaches who want to like work in the professional team, like, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, other than what I kind of already mentioned, is just reaching out any possible way to network and try to I would say this, not only are you reaching out to network, but when you're trying to network with somebody, try to actually develop a relationship with them. You know what I mean? And like use it as like a mentorship program, use it as just kind of just a talking points, because a lot of times people will reach out, and trust me, we get it, hundreds of them, and people will reach out and you can instantly just tell all they want is they want something from you. They don't actually want to learn anything, talk to you. They just almost want you to give them a job, to give them something, to give them a career. And it's just not going to work that way. Like, trust me, if there's people who are in a position trying to hire somebody in a certain role, they're going to try to put somebody who has a great personality, a great work ethic. And unless you reach out and network with people to try to establish some of those items, and build a rapport, then it's not going to work for you. So I get a lot of people where even just the way that they present themselves and try to introduce themselves, you can instantly just tell that they're in it for the wrong reason, So some of it I would just say is networking, number one, but how you go about your networking is pretty critical, because it's all about relationships. And there's a reason why sometimes you don't see openings in MBAs, like sometimes they do, and it's because they're required to. But I promise you, those jobs are not posted. Those jobs you don't hear about, you don't see them posted. And if they are, they're already taken. And so it's an industry based on relationships. And so now, as far as a coaching standpoint, I would say you need to be very eager and open to learning every possible theory, method, philosophy you can, and you need to be open to it. So sometimes coaches will go through school or their own ways, as an athlete or coach, and they're pretty set in their ways. And so oftentimes the type of person that I'm looking for is somebody who can challenge the system, ask questions, but also they need to learn that they can be wrong, right? Like they're not gonna be able to be right. And if they are, they can't be so stubborn that, they're gonna cause issues because, they just, the decision went against their, what they believed in. And so those are a couple of things for you. But I mean, I would say it's, for those who want to work in the NBA, it's a long journey, but it's got to start with developing relationships and learning from those who have been there.
So how did you find like Corey?
Honestly, through, I would say the first time social media was like probably the first time that we had some brief interactions. And then ironically, we had a coach on our staff for the Phoenix Suns my first year here, named Brandon Rosenthal, and he's actually with Arizona State University now, but he was roommates with Corey when they coached at a different university, many years ago. And so then, we kind of knew Corey just from afar from social media, but then when we actually went through to play Golden State a couple of years ago, Brandon had mentioned he was going to have dinner with Corey and that he, wanted to come introduce us and all that. So it was kind of just, we met through mutual friends, and then while Corey was at Stanford, that's kind of how we met in person the first time. And then again, that kind of relationship went from there. And then shortly after, because at that time I was the strength coach. And so shortly after we had some changes and then we were looking to create a team and make some hiring. So that's kind of how he became one of our candidates.
Cool. So you also mentioned like coaches should be eager to learn. And when it's in the NBA or like a performance coach in the industry, it's gotta be pretty busy. So how to like stay passionate to learn?
Yeah, that's an answer that changes for everybody. You know what I mean? Whether how you find your motivation to seek knowledge, to take courses, and even for myself, and that we have a very short off season. So by the time you get an off season, you're trying to reset mentally, and spend time with family, get away from work and have some life balance. But that's the same time for us is where we need to get some continuing education. We need to take some courses, learn from others, read, you name it. But sometimes you're just not in the mood, right? So I would say it just depends on the person. It depends on how motivated you are, and you just got to keep asking. That's another networking tool right there. Is the people that you're talking to, you got to ask them, what are you reading? What are you into right now? What are you learning? What are you into from a continuing education standpoint? Because I could tell you right now, as a young coach, of course, you should go to all the major symposiums and conferences and find those abilities to just learn from others and develop from within. But after you do that for a few years, you should still stay in touch with that. But after you've done that a few years, you start to develop some small inner circles of some connections, and then you start using them as your mentors and your soundboards, So sometimes I'm just asking some of my own colleagues, like, what are they reading? What are they hearing? And just start exploring.
What is the last book you read?
Currently right now I'm reading the Toyota Way. So a little bit more about leadership and developing a team and how to keep them organized. Because again, some of the things that have changed for me drastically in the last few years are my role of kind of keeping the team on pace. So I've had to take a little bit of a step back from being the average foot soldier that the strength coaches are, and have had to tailor my role a little bit more as just keeping every department on the same page. So that's the most recent book I've been reading.
Is there like any different for like leading a bunch of athletes to like leading like athletic trainer or like coaches?
Oh yeah, there's differences all over the board, but I mean the one thing that's pretty common is, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, but is working with egos. You know what I mean? We always say it all the time, like you don't you don't get to the college or any level without some sort of an ego, right? Because most of us were athletes ourselves. We're very competitive. We want to do great things. We want to, reach the top of the mountain. But that's definitely a common theme there is it's kind of when you're working with a group of competitive people who have egos, you're trying to figure out what's the best course of action to get them on the same page. Because even as far as the players go, the teams who make it the furthest, they're not usually the ones who have the most talent. They're the ones who play collectively as a team, right? Like that's really how it works. And so whatever methods you can do as a leadership within those teams to find the ability to maximize how your team's going to perform together, that's kind of where it happens.
So there are times you're gonna like, what exactly is the difference for being like from a strength coach to lead like all these like department?
What is it as a strength coach? So that's the other background of mine. Maybe you don't realize is that I was an athlete trainer before I was a strength coach. So for me, and many years ago, like I was kind of connecting the dots and the bridge there from the medical side to the performance side, which is now kind of a standard curriculum, whether you've got, you're a physical therapist or performance coach, right? So I wouldn't say that I'm predominantly wearing a performance hat all the time. A lot of times I am spending more time on the medical side, dealing with injuries, rehab, and, return to play. But that for me, the performance side was always a passionate side for me, just with how I was brought up as an athlete and just the way I just love being in the weight room. And so, when I'm kind of leading this team overall, I definitely have a lot more fun and passion when it comes to the performance side and to making athletes, perform at a higher level.
So did you still train athlete right now?
What's that?
I mean, did you like still train athlete right now or just?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we have a team in place for everything. So sometimes I find myself being pulled aside for 12 different reasons. And so I don't train athletes 100% of the time anymore, just because that's also, we have a team of 3 or 4 strength coaches who do that. But yeah, I'm still in there involved as much as I can be. It's not over the last few years with COVID, it hasn't been very much because that was my primary role to deal with all the COVID protocols. But yeah, like, so for example, right now we've got a handful of guys that are in training every day. And I've got 1 or 2 in particular that I'm working closely with.
Well, since you brought up like COVID, like before COVID and after COVID, what do you think like is the like changes?
As far as just from our day to day?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of gotten back to the normal, like pre-COVID for us now, you know what I mean? With everything going on. But I would say it definitely raised a lot of awareness from us to be educated from an illness standpoint. But it also made us realize how much you can do remotely, from meetings, from like, via Zooms and all that, and just having to be organized and really just focus on an area that are critical. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just couldn't do certain things because of COVID or protocols, and you just had to learn to live with it. But we found a way to succeed during all those constraints. And so I think that there were good things and bad things about going through all the COVID protocols and over those years. But I think that we found some resolve that we can kind of get through anything with it.
Cool. That's like all the questions I have for today, okay? I know I reached out to you like months ago and it was like during season. I'm sorry to keep bothering you.
No problem at all. Like I said, everybody's busy, and once the season ended abruptly for us, it's just, again, like I said, trying to have some of that life balance. And so you just got to stay persistent. Eventually I'm glad we got this done.
Yeah. So when do you get back to busy schedule again?
I mean, we're pretty busy right now. We're about to lead into summer league in Las Vegas. You know, the draft is next week, and so we're still pretty busy right now. But we'll probably see all of our players back sometime September. And so till then, we're just kind of training guys as much as possible until we all come back together in September and start training camp.
Do you guys really get like vacations?
We do, yeah. Like as soon as the season ends, and then typically after summer league, those are your windows where you can kind of take some time and get away from it all. But it's still pretty challenging. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of hoops that we're juggling, from preparing for the draft and analyzing draft player prospects to summer league and then free agency. And then at the same time, you're still training all of your current players so that they get prepared for the season coming up. So we get some time, but it's not as easy as you'd think to take a vacation in the NBA.
Last thing before I let you go, okay?
Okay.
So throughout all these years, what keeps you like persistent, or like what keeps you passionate to like keep learning, or like keep being at the top of the professionals?
I mean, again, I think that changes person, case by case, person to person. For me, I just knew that I always wanted to be around sports and working within sports. And I also had, just for me personally, I just always wanted to serve others, so I found an ability to do that, to stick in sports, to help others. And fortunately for me, it was something that I found myself passionate about, and so I've been pretty spoiled and pretty lucky to be able to find a number of things that I love to do, from training, being in the weight room, to helping others on the medical side. And then just leading a team. Like I didn't realize that was something that I was so eagerly seeking to learn more about. Now I'm just, extremely blessed to have that opportunity to learn. And trust me, I just like most of us, I'm failing every day in some things too, you know what I mean? But I find ways through failures to grow and learn upon. But for me, it's just those things. I feel like every day I'm not necessarily working. We have some long days, don't get me wrong. It's a lot of time, a lot of work, but I absolutely love what we do, and pretty fortunate that I've been able to work in this environment.
Cool. I'm sorry to like keep bothering you, but I'm a big fan of like Phoenix Suns. Really love like Devin Booker. So
yeah.
So that's like all the questions I have for today. Appreciate it, man. Sorry for putting
you're welcome
in the like super busy schedule.
Oh, no problem. I'm always busy. So we'll find time. Like I said, you did a great job staying persistent. Eventually we'll find time. It's just sometimes you got to be ready to make some changes.
Probably if it's possible, sorry for my poor English. It was like 5 a.m. in Taiwan right now. But, is it possible, like probably do a second episode, like probably next season?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Just reach out and let me know.
Sorry. Appreciate it, man.
Okay, you're welcome.
See you.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.